The sun had not yet climbed over the horizon, and the fields of Cold Hollow were still tucked beneath a blanket of mist.
À thin layé of frost covered the grass, crackling under every careful footstep.
On the edge of the town's open-air market, a small figure moved slowly through the biting cold, barely taller than the wooden produce cart he pulled behind him. 5-year-old Ethan Blake wrapped his fingers tightly around the metal handle of the cart. His breath puffed into the air in little clouds. A hand-knitted red scarf was wound around his neck several times, fraying at the ends. The cart creaked behind him, its wooden wheels moaning under the weight of 2 crates filled with carrots, freshly harvested, still stained with Kentucky's red clay. Vendors were just beginning to set up their booths. Some paused to glance at the boy as he passed, but no one stepped forward to help. Most had seen him before. A few shook their heads or whispered among themselves.
"There's dead Blake kid again.
Where's his mama?" Still dragging that cart like he's 40 instead of 5. Ethan didn't respond. His face, round and freckled, was set with a determination far beyond his age. He'd done this every Saturday morning since his mother got sick enough to stay in bed longer. She called it helping. He called it just what we do. He reached the corner of Main and Sycamore, where the market opened like a patchwork quilt of tents and wooden tables. He found their usual spot, 3rd row from the corner, next to Mrs. Tilley's honey stand, and parked the cart with a practiced swing. A man standing nearby had been watching. He was not from Cold Hollow. He wore a wool coat too nice for the area, held a notebook under one arm, and had the sort of face you don't forget, young, alert, with a kind of curiosity that didn't rest easily. His name was Jacob Reyes. Jacob had returned to Kentucky for the first time in years, visiting his aging aunt after 3 years of living and reporting in New York City. The town felt too slow, too quiet, but this morning was different. He raised his phone and snapped a photo. The composition was unplanned, but powerful.
A tiny boy pulling a heavy car under grey ski, framed by a rising mist.
The kind of image that didn't need explanation. Later that morning, as Jacob sat in the back booth of Darlene's diner with a cup of black coffee, he opened Twitter and posted the photo. The caption read, "What's a 5-year-old doing alone in the freezing dawn, pulling 50 pounds of carrots?"
Cold Hollow, Kentucky. Weekendo better than this.
He closed his phone and didn't think much of it. But the internet did. By the time Ethan returned home that afternoon, the photo had been shared over 50,000 times. People demanded answers. They wanted to know who the boy was, where his parents were, and why a child was laboring in the cold while most kids his age were eating cereal and watching cartoons. Ethan didn't know any of that. He just knew his mom was still coughing, and the soup they had wasn't enough to last another night. Their home was a small trailer on the outskirts of town, nestled among brittle pine trees and rusted fences. Inside, the heater wheezed, and Sarah Blake lay on the couch, pale and thin, her face turned to the window. She opened her eyes as Ethan stepped in, and he grinned, missing 2 front teeth. "Sold most of 'em," he said proudly, lifting a dented tin box that rattled with coins. Sarah tried to sit up but winced and fell back. "You did all that by yourself?" Ethan nodded.
"I'm your little soldier."
She smiled and reached out to tousle his hair.
"My little man."
Sarah's cough interrupted the warmth of the moment. She turned away, covering her mouth with a towel. The sound was harsh, deep, and far too frequent lately. Ethan didn't flinch. He had heard it all before. That night, Sarah took longer than usual to fall asleep.
She lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind whistle through the crack of the trailer.
She thought about the bills hidden in the drawer beneath the kitchen sink. About the medicine she couldn't afford. About the father Ethan would never meet. She had chosen to raise Ethan alone. She hadn't called him, hadn't begged, hadn't written letters.
Pride?
Maybe. Protection? Definitely. She didn't want her son growing up under the illusion that the man who left would one day walk back through the door and say, "I'm here now." She had been 19. He had been the golden boy of their community college, Liam Carter. He studied artificial intelligence, she studied English literature. For a brief, fierce year, they were everything to each other. But when his mother found out about Sarah, daughter of a farmer, working 3 jobs, no pedigree, she had ended it. Or more precisely, she had ended Sarah from his life. Liam hadn't fought hard. Not then. He'd left. Moved on. She never heard from him again. Until now. Though she didn't know it yet, that photo, the one Jacob had taken, had traveled across the country. Past timelines and feeds, until it reached a luxury office in San Francisco where Liam Carter sat alone in a glass tower. He stared at the image on his screen, unable to breathe for a moment. The scarf.
The boy's eyes.
The curve of his cheek. He knew. The phone slipped from his hand. For the first time in years, Liam Carter's mind went somewhere it hadn't dared in a long time, back to Cold Hollow. Back to the life he had once walked away from. And now, perhaps, to a life he no longer had the right to reclaim. Sarah Blake sat by the kitchen window with a worn blanket draped over her shoulders. Morning light filtered through the glass, softening the harsh lines that had begun to etch themselves into her face. Her coffee had gone cold, untouched, as she stared outside at the trees bowing gently in the wind. Inside the trailer, Ethan hummed quietly to himself as he colored a paper towel with broken crayons. It had been 2 days since the photo of Ethan pulling his cart had gone viral. Sarah hadn't seen it yet. Their home had no internet, and her phone only worked when she walked a half-mile up the road to the gas station. But she could feel something shifting in the air. People stared longer when she walked through town. A local pastor had dropped off a bag of groceries without saying much. And someone from the Courier-Journal had left a note on their door asking for a statement. She knew something was coming. It always did, eventually. Jacob Reyes, meanwhile, stood on the porch of the trailer, hesitating. He held a paper bag of groceries in one hand and his notebook in the other. He had spent the last 2 days dodging calls from media outlets and influencers begging for exclusive interviews. They wanted to know about the boy. They wanted a narrative, something heartwarming or tragic. They wanted permission to make Ethan a symbol. Jacob had refused every offer. He wasn't interested in turning a 5-year-old's struggle into content. What he wanted was to meet the boy's mother. To know her story, not the polished version that played well on social media, but the real one.
The hard one.
He knocked. The door creaked open after a moment. Sarah stood there in a faded flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, her eyes guarded. She looked like someone who had learned to be suspicious of kindness. "You're the man who took the photo," she said. "I am," Jacob replied. "I brought groceries." She looked at the bag.
"We don't take charity."
"It's not charity," he said gently. "It's an apology, for not asking before I shared the photo."
Sarah hesitated.
Then she stepped aside. Inside, the air was warm but thin. The walls were lined with second-hand books and shelves crowded with mason jars. Ethan looked up from his drawing and gave Jacob a shy wave. Jacob sat down at the small table, trying to ignore the persistent wheeze of the old furnace. He glanced around, noting the signs of order despite poverty. Everything had its place. The kitchen was spotless, though the linoleum was cracked. The couch cushions had been carefully mended with embroidery thread. There was dignity here. And pride. "I've been getting calls," Sarah said, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. "People I haven't heard from in years."
Étrangère.
A church in Ohio offered to sponsor Ethan's school fees. Some woman in California wants to send us winter coats. "That's good, isn't it?" Jacob asked.
Sarah shrugged.
"It's something. But none of them really see us. They see what they want. A struggling single mom.
A sad little boy. En easy story."
Jacob nodded slowly. "I didn't mean to use you like that." "You didn't," she replied, surprising him. "You just told the truth. People made it into a story." He looked at her carefully.
"Do you want to tell me the rest of it?"
She leaned back, arms crossed. "Why?"
"Because you're so matters. And so do you."
"And if this attention keeps growing, people are going to start digging. They'll want to know where his father is. Why he isn't around."
Sarah's eyes narrowed.
She took a slow breath, the tension in her shoulders rising. "He left," she said simply. 6 years ago.
Never came back.
Never called." "Did he know about Ethan?" "Yes. I told him. He said it wasn't the right time for a family. He had ambitions. A future. And I didn't fit into it." Jacob didn't speak. He just scribbled a few lines in his notebook, not for publication, but for understanding. "I made peace with it," Sarah continued. "I stopped expecting apologies. Stopped hoping he'd show up on birthdays or Christmas. It's better that way. Jacob hesitated before asking, "Do you think Ethan will want to know him one day?" Sarah looked at her son, who had returned to coloring a picture of a barn and two stick figures. She swallowed hard. "I don't know," she whispered.
Il try to be un œuf.
"But sometimes I see him looking out the window for too long."
Andy wonder.
There was a knock at the door.
Loud, unexpected. Sarah stiffened.
Jacob stood up, ready to intercept, but Sarah beat him to it. She opened the door, and her body froze. Standing there, under the soft gray light, was a man in a dark coat. His eyes, once familiar, now seemed distant and unsure. His hands were empty. His face was pale. His voice, when it came, cracked at the edges. "Sarah." She didn't answer. Liam Carter looked past her and saw Ethan sitting at the table, completely unaware. "I saw the photo," Liam said. I think he's my son." Sarah stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "You don't get to just show up after 6 years," she hissed. "I know," he said. "I'm not here to take anything. I needed to see." "See what?" she snapped.
The damage? The mess you left.
Liam looked down at the frost-covered porch. "I didn't know what to say back then. I was scared. And my mom, she made it clear." "Don't blame her," Sarah cut in. "You left. You. Not her.
You chose your life.
And I chose mine.
Without you."
Liam looked at her then, eyes filled with guilt. "He looks like me."
Don't say that.
"I want to help," he said quietly.
Whatever you need. Sarah shook her head, trembling.
"We needed you 6 years ago. Now? We're not your responsibility." She turned and walked back inside, closing the door gently but firmly. Inside, Ethan looked up. "Who was that?" "Just someone from the past," she replied, her voice flat. "Nothing you need to worry about." But even as she said it, Sarah knew the truth was shifting. The photo Jacob had taken had done more than go viral. It had torn open a door she had kept shut for years. And now, standing on the other side of that door, was the man she had once loved. And the father Ethan had never known. The sun was already high when Liam Carter left Cold Hollow that day, but the chill lingered in his chest long after he returned to San Francisco. His flight had landed late, and by the time he stepped into the high-rise building that housed his company's headquarters, he felt like he was walking in someone else's shoes. The lobby smelled faintly of espresso and fresh carpet. Receptionists in tailored suits nodded at him, and interns whispered as he passed. Liam Carter was a name people knew, a success story they admired. CEO by 32.
Tech innovator. The golden mind of Silicon Valley.
Yet none of that had mattered when Sarah Blake looked him in the eyes and said, "We're not your responsibility." Now, as he stepped into his office, glass walls, minimalist decor, shelves lined with awards, he felt small. Not because of the space, but because of what he had seen. Because of what he hadn't done. He dropped into his chair and opened his laptop. The screen came to life, and there it was, the photo. Ethan, pulling the cart through mist and frost, scarf wrapped tightly around his tiny neck. The image had over 5 million shares. Celebrities had reposted it. Non-profits were setting up fundraising pages. A local senator had used the photo in a speech about poverty in rural America. But Liam didn't see politics or hashtags. He saw his son. He zoomed in until the scarf came into focus. Red, frayed at the ends, with a slight curl to the wool where it had been worn thin. It wasn't just any scarf. He knew it immediately. He had seen it before. Held it. Worn it. It was the same scarf Sarah had knitted for him the winter they lived together in a one-bedroom apartment near campus. He had lost his gloves, and she'd surprised him with the scarf on Christmas morning, laughing as she wrapped it around his neck. "I couldn't afford anything fancy," she'd said, "but it'll keep you warm." He had kissed her then, still holding the yarn in his hands. He remembered the smell of her hair, the scratch of wool against his chin. That was the same winter he'd received his internship offer in San Francisco. The same winter his mother had found out about Sarah. Liam pushed his chair back and stood up. He walked to the mirror on the far wall, the one that stretched from floor to ceiling. His reflection stared back, dressed in an impeccable navy suit, tie knotted just right. Hair trimmed.
Joe clean-shaven.
Every part of him curated for success. And yet, behind his own eyes, he saw a coward. He remembered the call from his mother. How her voice had sharpened when she said Sarah was a distraction. How she had reminded him, coldly, efficiently, that everything he had worked for could be ruined by a girl from a small town with no future. "She's not your equal, Liam," his mother had said. "If you stay with her, you will not rise." He had argued. For a while. But he had also been afraid. Afraid of losing everything before it even began. Afraid of being cut off. Afraid of not living up to the version of himself everyone expected. So he had left. At first, he told himself it was temporary. He would build his career, and then come back for her. But time passed. One internship turned into a job offer. That job offer turned into a startup. Investors came. Doors opened. And Sarah? Sarah became a memory filed away in the box marked before. Then one day she had called. Her voice was quieter than he remembered. She said she needed to talk. She said it was important. But he had just landed a contract with a Fortune 500 company and was preparing to pitch to a venture capitalist who could change everything. He told her it wasn't a good time. That he'd call her back. He never did. She didn't call again. Liam leaned against the glass, pressing his forehead to the cool surface. For years, he had justified that silence. Told himself she was better off without him. That maybe the pregnancy, if that's what she had wanted to tell him about, had ended. That if the child had survived, Sarah would have reached out again. But she hadn't. And now he knew why. Ethan had been growing up without him. Learning how to tie his shoes, how to throw a ball, how to carry more than his own weight, without ever knowing his father's name. And all because Liam had chosen comfort over courage. There was a knock on the door. He turned. His assistant, Ava, poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Carter, but the board meeting starts in 15. "I'm not going," Liam said. Ava blinked. "Excuse me."
Cancel the meeting.
"Reschedule the investor call. Clear my calendar for the week." Ava stepped fully into the room, concern on her face.
Is everything all right?
Liam stared at the photo still open on his screen. "No," he said. "But it might be."
If he fix it.
That night, he checked into a modest hotel just outside of Cold Hollow. He didn't call ahead. He didn't try to arrange a meeting. He just walked through the town the next morning, letting the air and the silence settle into his skin. The buildings were smaller than he remembered.
The street sentier.
But it was all familiar. The gas station.
The librairie.
The cafe where he and Sarah had once shared slices of lemon pie and talked about their dreams. He ended up at the edge of the churchyard, where he saw a small community garden behind the parish building. Rows of carrots, onions, and greens lined up like soldiers in the soil. He saw a woman stooped low pruning. She had white hair and a sun hat. He walked closer. "Excuse me," he said.
Do you know Sarah Blake?
The woman looked up.
Everyone here knows Sarah.
"She's at home resting. I'd like to speak with her." The woman straightened and studied him. "You're the father, aren't you?"
Et hésita-t-elle.
"Yes." She didn't smile.
She doesn't need you.
"I know," Liam said. "But I need to tell her that." The woman turned back to her garden. "She won't believe your words." "I don't expect her to." She pointed toward a narrow path. "Her trailer's down that way."
White. 2 windows. Red curtain.
Liam nodded and started walking. As he reached the end of the path, he saw the trailer. A small, weather-worn home surrounded by pine trees. Smoke curled from the chimney. A child's bike leaned against the porch. He took a deep breath. Then he knocked. Sarah opened the door slowly, already knowing who it would be. Something about the way the wind had quieted, the way the birds had stilled, made her stomach knot even before the knock came. Liam stood on the porch, hands in the pockets of his coat, eyes uncertain. It wasn't the face of a tech mogul, not the one she'd occasionally see on magazine covers or in news stories that filtered through the town's gossip. He looked tired. Older. Human. "Twice in 2 days," she said flatly. He offered a small smile. I figured once wasn't enough. She didn't move from the doorway.
You figure wrong.
Can I come in?
No. The silence stretched.
He glanced past her, hoping for a glimpse of Ethan, but the boy wasn't in sight. I'm not here to make trouble, Sarah. I just want to understand. To know him. To fix what I broke. You don't get to fix this, she said. You don't walk away for 6 years and then knock on a door and call it redemption. I know, he said quietly. I know that now. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her. The cold bit through her sweater, but she didn't flinch. Say what you came to say, she said. Then go. Liam looked at her, really looked, and saw the toll the years had taken. The lines around her eyes, the faint pallor in her skin, the way she stood a little off balance. She wasn't the same girl he'd left behind. And she wasn't trying to be. I saw the photo, he said. It felt like being punched. That scarf, it's the one you made me. I remember it. I didn't know you kept it. It was never about you, she snapped. That scarf was Ethan's before he could walk. He clung to it in the crib. I couldn't afford blankets back then. It kept him warm. Liam's throat tightened. I didn't know he existed, he said. Not for sure. Sarah's eyes burned.
Don't lie to me, Liam.
He looked down. You called. I didn't pick up. She didn't reply. The memory still stung, her fingers trembling over the phone, the way her heart had raced as it rang, the voicemail she had nearly left but couldn't. He never called back. That had been enough. I didn't have the courage, Liam said, voice low. I thought I could build a life first, come back when I was someone. But I never came back. No, Sarah said. You didn't. And we lived without you. I want to help now, he said. Not out of guilt. Out of responsibility. If there's anything I can do, medical bills, school. She cut him off. Don't you dare try to buy your way into this. I'm not trying to buy anything. You think showing up now erases 6 birthdays? 6 Christmas mornings where I had to explain why Santa brought socks and not a bike.
Her voice cracked.
You weren't there when he had night terrors. You didn't hold him after his first fever. You didn't teach him to count, to write his name, to say please and thank you. You don't get to come in and be part of the story now just because the world saw a photo. Liam's face tightened. I'm not asking for a clean slate.
I just want to be there.
I want to know him. That's all. Sarah looked away, blinking fast. The woods beyond their yard were quiet, dusted with the faint shimmer of frost. He's not ready, she said. He's 5. He doesn't even know what it means to have a father. And I'm not about to confuse him more. Then let me earn it, Liam said.
Let me start somewhere.
I'll stay in town. Quietly.
I won't te push.
Just, give me the chance to try. She didn't answer, not right away. A part of her wanted to slam the door and make him disappear again. Another part, the part that had cried herself to sleep for months after he left, wanted to scream and collapse into his arms. But she had outgrown both versions of herself. She wasn't broken anymore. She was tired, yes, but she was whole. Fine, she said finally.
You stay away from the house.
You don't tell him who you are.
And you don't make promise you can't keep.
Liam nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. And if you hurt him, she added, I swear, I'll make sure you regret ever coming back. He didn't doubt her for a second. That night, Sarah sat beside Ethan as he played with his plastic dinosaur figures. The scarf was tied around his favorite T-Rex, which had lost an arm months ago. Did you see the man from earlier? Ethan asked. Sarah paused. I did. Was he a stranger? She hesitated. Sort of. He looked like me, Ethan said simply, not asking a question, just making an observation.
Sarah's briscoed.
He had sad eyes, Ethan added.
Like you when you watch the news.
She wrapped an arm around him. Let's not think about him right now, okay? He nodded, already distracted.
Do you think te? Rex, j'ai cold in the winter.
Probably, she whispered. That's why he has the scarf. The next day, Liam went to the town library and asked about volunteer opportunities. He signed up for cleanup duty at the park and dropped off a donation at the food pantry without leaving his name. He helped Mrs. Keller fix her fence and carried boxes for the high school fundraiser. He made himself useful, and he kept his distance. But once a week, he found a reason to be near the market. Not close enough to intrude, but enough to catch a glimpse of Ethan helping his mother sell carrots, counting change with serious concentration, waving to passers-by. And every time he saw him, Liam's heart cracked a little more.
Because Ethan looked like Sarah.
He tilted his head when he was confused, just like Liam had as a boy. And when he smiled, really smiled, it felt like sunlight. But Ethan didn't know. Not yet. And Liam knew he'd have to earn every step toward the truth. The town of Cold Hollow had never been the kind of place that made national news. But within a week of the photo going viral, reporters in shiny vans rolled down its narrow streets like invaders. They came with big cameras and bigger smiles, asking friendly questions with sharp intentions.
Is this the house?
Can we get a quick word with the mother? Would Ethan be available for a short interview? At first, Sarah didn't answer the door. But they kept coming, pressing their cards against the window glass, asking neighbors for quotes, offering compensation for cooperation. By the third day, someone had flown a drone over her trailer, capturing aerial shots of her yard, her laundry line, her son's bicycle leaning against the porch. The internet had turned Ethan into a symbol. That should have been a good thing. But symbols were easier to worship than to protect. Social media exploded with opinions. Some praised Sarah as a hero, the embodiment of American resilience. Others picked her life apart like vultures on a carcass. She let a 5-year-old haul produce in the freezing cold?
Call child service.
Why have a kid if you can't take care of him? She's probably milking the story for donations. Typical.
Where's the father?
Why isn't anyone asking about him? Sarah watched the online frenzy from a borrowed phone at the local diner. She didn't have the energy to be angry. Just tired. Tired in the way that lives in your bones and never quite leaves. Jacob Reyes had stayed in town longer than he'd planned. He checked in on Sarah daily, bringing coffee or groceries, and always asking permission before sharing anything. He'd made it clear, he wasn't there to exploit her. He deleted his original tweet, even as others reposted the image hundreds of times. This story belongs to you, he'd said.
Not the internet.
But some things were out of his control. One afternoon, as Sarah stepped out of the pharmacy, a woman in a designer coat approached her with a forced smile.
Sarah Blake, right? I'm Victoria Lan, senior producer at American Voices.
We're putting together a piece on rural motherhood and online fame. We'd love to feature you. It's a chance to tell your side, give Ethan a platform. No, Sarah said. It would be a soft segment, I promise. We're talking awards season buzz. Exposure. Maybe even a sponsorship deal.
No. The woman's smile faltered. Don't you want people to hear your truth?
Sarah stared at her. My truth isn't for sale. Back at the trailer, she found Ethan sitting silently at the table, his crayon drawings abandoned. His backpack lay on the floor, half unzipped. You okay? She asked, kneeling beside him. He didn't look up. Kids at school said you were famous. They said I'm only famous because we're poor. Sarah closed her eyes. People say things they don't understand. One girl said you made me pull the cart so you could be on TV. Sarah's throat tightened. I don't want to be famous, Ethan whispered. You're not, she said gently.
You're just Ethan.
And that's more than enough. That night, she sat at the kitchen table long after Ethan had gone to bed. Liam's business card sat in front of her, untouched since he'd left it days ago. She hated that she kept it. Hated that part of her still wondered what life might have been if things had been different. Across town, Liam sat in his rented room, scrolling through comments. Some had begun to piece the story together. A few local blogs mentioned that he and Sarah had dated in college. One had posted a yearbook photo of them holding hands at a campus festival. Then came the speculation. Could this be the dad? Looks like a tech guy, he's worth millions now.
Classique.
Leaves the girl behind, then swoops in for PR when it goes viral.
The accusation stung.
Not because they were wrong, but because they were deserved. Liam closed the browser and stared at the ceiling. He hadn't said anything publicly. Not yet. Not until Sarah allowed it. But if the truth came out without her consent, it would only hurt more. He thought about Ethan. About the way the boy had gripped the edge of the table while counting change. The way he had looked up at Sarah with complete trust. That was a bond built over years, not something Liam could just insert himself into. He needed to be careful. Needed to wait. But time was running out. The next morning, Liam visited Jacob at the diner. The reporter was scribbling in a notebook, headphones around his neck.
Mein Defizit.
Liam asked. Jacob didn't look up. Sure. I'm thinking of making a statement, Liam said.
Something small.
Just to clear the air. Jacob looked at him then. You sure that's not about your reputation?
Liam hésitated.
I just don't want Sarah to be dragged through this any more than she already has. Jacob closed his notebook. Then maybe the best thing you can do is say nothing. Sometimes protecting someone means staying in the background. Liam nodded slowly. He didn't like it, but he understood. Later that day, Sarah found another envelope slipped through the mail slot. It was from a local nonprofit, a check for $500 and a letter explaining that someone had made a donation in her name. The signature at the bottom was simple. For Ethan.
LC.
She folded the letter and tucked it away without a word. The following week, the media attention began to die down. A new story took over the headlines. A celebrity scandal. A hurricane off the coast. People moved on, as they always did. But in Cold Hollow, the ripple effects remained. Ethan spoke less. Sarah grew more cautious. And Liam kept showing up, at a distance. At the market, at the community center, at the school fundraiser where he stayed in the back, never introducing himself but always contributing. He was waiting.
Waiting for something to shift.
Waiting for a sign that the wall might crack. And one day it did, just a little. It was Ethan who spotted him first, standing near the lemonade table at the town fair. The boy walked over, curious but guarded. You're the man who came to our house, he said. Liam crouched to his level. I am. Why? I wanted to make sure you were okay. Ethan tilted his head. Do you know my mom? Liam nodded. A long time ago. Before you were born. Ethan looked him over, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrinkled drawing.
Tout stick figure, one tale dense odeur, holdingan.
This was supposed to be me and my dad, he said quietly. But I don't know what he looks like. Liam swallowed hard. He would be lucky to have you. Ethan nodded, folded the drawing again, and walked away without another word. Liam stood there, rooted to the ground. It wasn't an invitation. But it wasn't rejection either. And for now, that was enough. Autumn deepened in Cold Hollow. The trees lining the roads had begun to shed their leaves, blanketing sidewalks and yards in gold and rust.
Morning cam coldenau, the air crisp and still.
The small town seemed quieter after the media frenzy died down, but for Sarah, the tension remained, stretched taut like a string that might snap at any moment. Ethan had become quieter too. He no longer ran outside after breakfast or chattered while packing his school bag. He still pulled the cart to the market on Saturdays, but now he did so with less joy, his face a mask of concentration. Sarah noticed it. She felt it in the way he avoided certain questions, how he hesitated before asking things he once said without fear. That Saturday, Liam was waiting by the far end of the market, standing beneath a maple tree whose leaves burned red against the pale sky. He didn't approach. He watched. As usual, Sarah and Ethan set up their small table. The carrots were stacked neatly, the jars of pickled vegetables arranged by size. Business was slow. Most people had already heard the story, already dropped off donations or taken photos or offered words of support. Now they passed with nods and polite distance. It was Ethan who noticed Liam first. He turned to his mother. That man's here again. Sarah didn't look. Ignore him. Ethan stared for a moment longer. Then, without a word, he walked away from the booth, past the baked goods stand and toward the maple tree. Liam saw him coming. He straightened, hands slipping nervously into his coat pockets. Hi, Ethan said. Hi, Liam replied, trying not to sound too eager. Busy day.
Ethan shrugged.
Not really.
Nobody ou encore today. Liam smiled softly. Ido. He was just waiting for the right time to come over.
Ethan looked at him for a long moment, then asked, "Are you my dad?"
Liam blinked.
The question hit harder than any slap, sharper than any insult. "Why do you ask that?" he said quietly. "Because you keep showing up," Ethan replied.
And you look like me.
"And Mom always gets mad when I ask about you." Liam crouched so they were eye level. "Ethan, I'm not trying to scare you or confuse you. I just want to be around, if that's okay." Ethan didn't answer right away. He kicked at the leaves on the ground, then looked back toward his mother's booth. She hadn't noticed yet. "If you're my dad," he said slowly, "where were you?" Liam swallowed hard. "I made a mistake. A big one. I wasn't ready. I was scared." Ethan frowned. Of what? Of being a dad. Of not doing it right. Of messing things up. Ethan's voice was flat when he answered. "You did mess it up." Liam nodded. "Yes, I did." There was silence between them, the kind that made your chest ache. Finally, Ethan said, "She cried. Sometimes at night. I heard her." Liam closed his eyes. "And sometimes she wouldn't eat for days," Ethan continued. "I asked if it was my fault. She said no, but I think maybe it was yours."
Liam's voice shook.
"It wasn't your fault. Not even a little bit. Everything she went through, everything you've had to go through, that's on me." Ethan took a step back. "So now you're here because people saw my picture? Because they feel sorry for me?" "No," Liam said.
"I'm here because he saw you."
"And I saw what I missed. And I don't want to miss any more."
Ethan's eyes narrowed.
"But I don't want a dad." Liam nodded slowly. "Okay." "I don't need one," Ethan added. "I have Mom.
You have Jacob.
I have Mrs. Keller and Mr. Tom from the church. They help. They don't leave." Liam felt his heart twist, but he didn't argue. "I understand," he said. Ethan stood in silence for a moment longer, then turned and walked back to the booth. Sarah had seen them now. Her eyes locked with Liam's across the market. She didn't speak, didn't move. She just watched. That night, Sarah sat at the kitchen table after Ethan went to bed. A pot of tea steamed between her hands. Jacob sat across from her, tapping a pen against his notebook, though he wasn't writing anything. "He asked him," Sarah said finally. "Ethan." She nodded. "He asked if Liam was his father."
Jacob exhaled.
"That's a heavy thing for a kid to carry." "I told myself he wouldn't notice. That if I loved him enough, he wouldn't feel the absence." "No one can love enough to fill a silence that big," Jacob said gently. Sarah looked down. "He said he doesn't want a dad." "And does he mean it?" "I think he means he doesn't want that dad."
The one who left. The one who is a stranger.
Jacob nodded. "So what happens now?" "I don't know," Sarah whispered.
He don't know how to let Liam in without breaking something.
Later that night, Sarah stood outside on the porch, watching the stars blink faintly above the trees. The scarf Ethan loved so much was draped over the railing, drying in the night air. She thought of Liam's face when she'd first told him no. The regret. The guilt. But also something else, something quiet and real. A man trying to put pieces back together with hands that had once shattered them. Inside, Ethan stirred in his sleep. He called out once, not in fear but in confusion. Sarah stepped inside and sat beside him, brushing the hair from his forehead. "Do you want to know about him?" she asked softly, unsure if he was even awake.
Ethan mumbled, half asleep.
"He looked sad." "He is," Sarah said. "But that doesn't mean he's ready to be part of your life." "Do I have to forgive him?" "No," she said gently. "Not yet."
Maybe not ever.
"That's up to you." He rolled over, curling into the blanket, and didn't speak again. And Sarah sat there in the quiet, knowing that no matter what Liam wanted, no matter what the world thought, it was Ethan who would decide what came next. And he was just a little boy, carrying a weight no child should ever have to hold. Sarah didn't remember falling. Only the sound of the ceramic bowl shattering on the linoleum floor, the sudden dizziness that spun her vision sideways, and the way her knees hit the ground before her hands could catch her. Ethan screamed her name from across the room. She had been standing at the stove, stirring soup she didn't have the appetite for, when the world tilted. Now she lay crumpled on the kitchen floor, coughing hard, trying to draw air into lungs that felt like they were filled with gravel. Each breath scraped.
Her vision blurred, tunneled.
Ethan was beside her now, crying, pulling at her sleeve. Mom.
Mom, wake up.
She tried to speak, tried to smile. But the coughing came again, deep and wet. When she finally raised her head, the towel she pressed to her mouth was spotted with blood. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was Ethan sprinting out the door, barefoot, shouting for help. The hospital was small and overworked, tucked behind the town's single high school. It had one ER room, a handful of nurses, and a doctor who split his time between Cold Hollow and 2 other rural towns. But it was enough to keep Sarah alive. By the time Jacob reached the hospital, alerted by a frantic call from a neighbor, Sarah had already been admitted. Ethan sat curled in a plastic chair in the waiting room, wrapped in his scarf, knees pulled to his chest. His eyes were swollen from crying, but his face was dry now, too exhausted to shed more tears. Jacob sat beside him.
Et chant.
Ethan didn't look at him. They won't let me see her. I know. But the doctors are doing everything they can. She fell, Ethan whispered. She just fell.
Jacob placé à hand on the boy's back. You did the right thing.
You got help.
You saved her.
Ethan didn't answer. Jacob stood, walked to the front desk, and asked about Sarah's condition. The nurse looked down at her clipboard. She was severely dehydrated. Blood oxygen levels were low. Pneumonia in both lungs, and she's been refusing medication for weeks, apparently. Why she didn't come in earlier, she shook her head. She's in the ICU now. They're trying to stabilize her. Jacob turned back toward the waiting room, dread sinking in his chest. At that moment, the doors at the far end of the corridor swung open, and Liam Carter walked in. He looked wild, wind-blown, his coat half-zipped, hair disheveled. He scanned the room, saw Ethan first, then Jacob. What happened? He asked, breathless. She collapsed, Jacob said.
Ethan found her.
Liam looked at the boy, then back to Jacob. Is she?
She's alive.
Barely. ICU. Without a word, Liam turned toward the desk. I need to see her. I'll pay whatever you need. I'll sign whatever. She's unconscious, the nurse replied, already wary of his tone.
Family only.
I'm the father of her son, he said. That doesn't make you family. Jacob stepped forward, his voice quieter but more effective. He's listed on the emergency contact form. Sarah added him 2 days ago. The nurse paused, then nodded. 10 minutes later, Liam stood outside the ICU, staring through a pane of glass at a figure that barely resembled the Sarah he remembered. Her skin was pale, lips dry, eyes sunken. A thin mask covered her face, feeding her oxygen. Tubes ran from her arm, and machines beeped in rhythm with her struggling breath. He pressed a hand to the glass. His other hand trembled at his side. Then slowly, he sank to his knees. Not dramatically.
Not for show.
Just, down. The weight of everything pressed down on him all at once.
The years of silence. The choice. The selfishness.
The way he'd convinced himself that success made up for cowardice. He had run from her once, believing that money and titles could silence the part of him that hurt. But now in this sterile hallway, all his wealth, all his prestige, none of it mattered. He was just a man who had failed the woman he loved. And the boy who carried his name without ever knowing it. Inside the ICU, Sarah remained unconscious. Her breath wheezed in time with the machine. Liam watched the rise and fall of her chest, willing it not to stop. He stayed like that, kneeling, until a nurse tapped his shoulder. You can go in now. Just for a few minutes. He rose, wiped his face, and stepped inside. The room was quiet except for the hum of machines. He pulled a chair close and sat beside her, gently taking her hand. It was cold and still. I'm sorry, he whispered.
For everything.
His voice cracked.
I was afraid, Sarah.
Of losing my future, of disappointing people, of becoming someone I didn't recognize. But I already became that person. The second I walked away from you. Her fingers didn't move. Her eyes didn't flutter. But he kept talking, words pouring out like a dam had broken inside him. I missed every part of his life. I didn't hear his first word. I didn't hold him when he was sick. I didn't see the way he walks like you or smiles like me. I want to fix it. God, I want to fix it. But I know I can't. He swallowed. I don't deserve a second chance. But I'll stay. However long it takes. I'll stay. Outside, Ethan sat in Jacob's lap, head resting on the reporter's shoulder. Neither of them spoke. The weight of the day had silenced them both. Eventually, Jacob asked, "Do you want to go in and see her?"
Ethan shook his head.
"I want her to wake up first." A few hours later, Sarah stirred. Her eyelids twitched, and her lips parted beneath the oxygen mask. Her breathing still ragged, but conscious. Liam was the first to notice. He leaned in. "Sarah?
Can you hear me?"
Her eyes opened, slowly, painfully. She saw him, blurred through the haze of exhaustion and medication. She blinked again, focusing. "Why are you here?" she rasped. He smiled through his tears. "Because I should have been here all along." She closed her eyes again, not in rejection, not in pain. Just fatigue. But she didn't let go of his hand. And for now, that was enough. Sarah remained in the hospital for 9 days. The pneumonia eased slowly, but the doctors warned that it had pushed her body dangerously close to the edge. Malnutrition, chronic stress, and prolonged fatigue had worn her down far more than her appearance had ever revealed. Liam stayed through it all. He didn't sleep much, just dozed in the hard-backed chair beside her bed. When Sarah was too weak to speak, he held her hand. When she coughed through the night, he rubbed her back gently, afraid even to breathe too loud. Ethan visited once each day, escorted by Jacob. He brought drawings, held her fingers with both of his small hands, and talked softly about school, about the weather, about how he missed her cooking. But the visits were short. Hospital rooms overwhelmed him. One afternoon, as rain tapped softly against the window, Sarah opened her eyes fully for the first time in days. Her voice was still hoarse when she said, "I need to talk to you." Liam, seated beside her as usual, leaned forward. "Of course." "Not here," she said. "Not now. Later."
"When I can stand on my own."
He nodded, unsure what that meant, but knowing better than to press. On the 10th day, Sarah was discharged. Her steps were slow, deliberate, as she walked from the hospital doors. Liam offered to drive her home. She declined. "I need to walk."
I need to remember how it feels to move under my own power.
He didn't argue. He and Ethan walked beside her, silent. Jacob followed behind, carrying the paper bag of prescriptions and donated groceries. Back at the trailer, Sarah slept for a full day. Then, early the next morning, she woke before dawn, dressed slowly, and made tea. Ethan was still asleep. Liam waited in the yard, watching the fog settle over the treetops. She stepped outside, hands wrapped around the warm mug, and sat on the porch step beside him. "I've made a decision," she said quietly. Liam turned to her. "About what?" "About everything." He waited, heart thudding in his chest. "I'm leaving," she said.
Not forever.
"But for a while." His brow furrowed. "Where?" "There's a retreat center in Oregon. A place for women to rest, reflect. It's run by a small order of sisters. Not nuns exactly, but close. I applied before I got sick. They accepted me. I never planned to go. But now, I think I have to." Liam didn't know what to say.
You want to leave Ethan?
"No," she said quickly. "I don't want to. But I think I need to. Because if I stay, I'll keep falling apart in front of him. And he'll keep trying to carry the pieces." She looked at him then, eyes sharp and clear for the first time in weeks. "He deserves better than that." Liam's voice was rough. "You're his world." "I know. That's why I need to make sure I can keep being it." Silence stretched between them. "Will you take care of him?" she asked. "If I go?"
I will, Liam said, no hesitation.
Whatever he needs.
Whatever you need.
Sarah nodded, then looked out into the trees. You asked me once if I could forgive you, she said. He held his breath. I can, she said.
Ido. I don't carry hate.
Not anymore. But forgiveness isn't the same as return. Liam's shoulders slumped.
You don't love me.
She didn't answer right away. Then softly, I did. Once. With everything I had. But the woman who loved you died the day you didn't come back. And the one that grew up in her place, she doesn't know if she can love anyone anymore. Tears slipped silently down Liam's face. He nodded, accepting the wound without protest. I'm not asking for a second chance, he said. Just a place in his life. You've earned that, she said.
He knows you now.
It'll be up to him what that means. A few days later, Sarah sat with Ethan on the edge of his bed, folding a small pile of clothes into a duffel bag. You're going somewhere? He asked. She nodded. For a little while. Where?
À quelle place?
To rest. To get stronger. So I can come back and be the mom you deserve. His face tightened.
Can he come?
She cupped his cheek. No, baby. Not this time. He tried to be brave, but his lower lip trembled. Are you leaving because I said I didn't want a dad? No, she whispered. I'm leaving so you'll never feel like you have to choose between us. You can have both. You can love both. And I'll always come back. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her neck. She held him for a long time, whispering the lullaby she used to sing when he was too small to understand the words. When the bus pulled away from the station 2 mornings later, Liam stood with Ethan on the platform, the boy's small hand in his. Sarah waved from the window until they couldn't see her anymore. Ethan didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of people. But later that night, curled up on the couch with Liam nearby, he said quietly, I don't want her to be alone. She's not, Liam said. She's finding herself again. That's the bravest thing anyone can do. Ethan nodded, and after a moment he whispered, I think maybe I want to know you. A little. Liam turned to him, startled.
Ethan May says. You make bad pancake.
But you try.
Liam looked softly, the sound breaking into a sob.
I'll keep trying, he promised. And for the first time, Ethan reached for his hand without being asked. They sat like that, father and son, side by side, not fixed, not perfect but beginning. The next morning, Liam helped Ethan pack for school. As they left the trailer, Ethan paused on the porch, glanced toward the road where the bus had vanished, then looked up at Liam. You think she'll come back? I know she will, Liam said. How? Because she's the strongest person I've ever known. Ethan nodded. And together, they walked into the morning fog, 2 shadows growing slowly into one. News of Sarah's absence from San Francisco arrived through a brief fax from a local attorney to Mildred Carter's office, Liam's mother. She read the final line twice. Temporary guardianship of Ethan Blake is granted to Mr. Liam Carter while the biological mother undergoes treatment out of state. Mildred Carter, a woman who trusted documents more than emotions, felt her usual certainty shaken. She rose from her desk, her mind racing. 48 hours later, a sleek black SUV rolled to a stop outside Sarah's modest trailer home in rural Kentucky. High-heeled shoes clicked on gravel as Mildred Carter stepped out, clad in a cashmere coat that contrasted starkly with the worn surroundings. Liam appeared on the porch, sensing the gravity of the visit. Mom, he said, voice dry and guarded.
Mildred Carter surveyed the tableau. So this is where you live now.
It's not home. Just temporary while I care for Ethan. And Sarah. Mildred's eyes searched, hoping to see the woman she once scorned. She's away for treatment. You know that. Mildred said nothing more, stepping onto the porch and peering inside. Her gaze landed on a photo taped to the refrigerator, Ethan clutching a bunch of carrots, smiling brightly. No wealth or luxury, just pure, simple joy. That's your son, Liam said slowly. You never wanted to know him, but now he's here. He's growing up. And he deserves to be loved.
Turning away, Mildred muttered, You think you don't know how to love. Liam made her eyes. You love what you control. What you chose.
But you refuse to love your grandchild. Do you blame me? She asked, a faint challenge in her tone. No, Liam answered firmly.
I blame myself.
But I won't let you repeat that mistake. Ethan opened the door, stopping short at the sight of the stranger beside his father. Who are you? He asked cautiously. Mildred lowered her gaze. Her sharp eyes softened.
Are you Ethan?
He nodded, gripping the doorframe.
She bent down, forcing a smile.
I'm your father's mother.
Ethan glanced at Liam, seeking confirmation.
Liam nodded. Mildred reached into her purse and pulled out a small box, handing it to the boy. I brought this for you. It's your father's old toy truck. The only thing he never threw away. Ethan lifted the lid to reveal a worn metal toy truck, its paint chipped but intact. He ran his fingers over it and whispered thank you. Liam watched his mother silently, something unspoken passing between them. For the first time, Mildred wasn't offering money or control, just a small gesture of connection. That night, Mildred sat at the kitchen table in Sarah's home, a cup of tea warming her hands. Liam cooked dinner, and Ethan chopped vegetables. The simplicity of the scene unsettled her, a far cry from the life she imagined for her family. Do you love him that much? She asked quietly, eyes on the boy. Liam placed a pan on the stove. I love my son, Mom. And I loved Sarah.
Mais bistido.
Did you lose your career to live in a rundown town? Liam leaned on the counter. I didn't lose anything.
I found what matters most.
Mildred nodded, no argument left in her. After dinner, Ethan took her to the backyard to show his first carrot harvest. Under the pale moonlight, she listened as he spoke of the different vegetables, the owl he heard at night, and how his mother sang lullabies. She listened without interrupting or judging. Just listened. Later, as Liam walked her to the SUV, she turned to him. Your son is special. I know. Sarah, she hesitated.
She's strong.
She's the reason Ethan exists. She opened the car door but paused. I was wrong, she admitted softly. When I told you to leave her. I didn't know it would go this far. Liam only nodded. You don't need forgiveness, she said. But if there's a chance, teach the boy better than I taught you. Liam held the car door, looking back at her once more. I'm trying every day. The SUV disappeared down the gravel road. Liam returned to the porch where Ethan had fallen asleep clutching the toy truck. He lifted the boy gently, placing him in bed and tucking the blanket around him. On the kitchen counter, the voicemail light blinked.
A new message. Liam pressed play.
Sarah's voice, warm and soft as autumn breeze, filled the room. Ethan wrote me a letter. He says you make terrible scrambled eggs but try not to burn the toast.
I looked all morning.
I think I'm starting to miss home. Liam stood still, hand on the counter. The message ended with 3 words.
Stay strong.
He knew, though the path ahead was unclear, Sarah was finding her way back. Not just to her son, but to herself. And this time, they would wait. Not with blind hope, but with a trust forged through trial. Spring had slowly returned to the small Kentucky town, painting the fields in fresh shades of green and filling the air with the scent of earth and blossoms. The days grew longer, and with them, a subtle shift began to take root in the lives of the Carter family. Liam sat on the front porch of their modest home, sipping a cup of coffee, while Ethan played nearby, chasing a butterfly with the reckless abandon only a 6-year-old could muster. Sarah's voice came softly from the kitchen, humming a tune that once had been her lullaby as a child. It was a small but significant sound, one that spoke of healing, hope, and the reclaiming of what was almost lost. Months had passed since the emergency surgery and the heart-wrenching hospital scenes. Since then, the family had begun to knit itself back together, stitch by delicate stitch. Sarah's health was fragile, but improving steadily. The treatments were harsh and the road ahead uncertain, yet she embraced every moment, buoyed by Liam's unwavering presence and Ethan's innocent resilience. One morning, as the sun spilled golden light over the rolling hills, Liam found Sarah tending the small vegetable garden they had planted behind the house. The carrots were beginning to peek out of the soil, their green tops swaying gently in the breeze. I think these might be better than last year, Sarah said, brushing dirt from her hands and smiling weakly. Liam stepped beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. You've done a good job, Sarah.
Just like Ethan.
He's been helping me every day after school. Sarah looked up into his eyes, the distance between them closing in a way it hadn't for years. Thank you for staying, Liam. For not giving up. He shook his head. You didn't give up on us either. We're in this together now. Inside the house, Ethan was writing at the kitchen table. His little hands gripped a pencil awkwardly, forming letters he could barely read himself. He was practicing writing a letter, one that he insisted Liam help him mail to his mother in San Francisco. Do you want to write I love you too? Liam asked gently. Ethan looked up, wide-eyed. Yes. And thank you for coming back. Liam smiled. It was a phrase heavier than any business contract, and yet so much simpler to say. The story of their family was no longer about loss or abandonment. It was about responsibility and forgiveness. About embracing imperfections and choosing to move forward. That afternoon, Liam made a call to his old employer, a major investment firm in San Francisco. He had resigned months ago, but the time had come to officially close that chapter. He spoke calmly, explaining that his priorities had changed and that the life he once chased now felt hollow without the people he loved. Thank you for everything, he said before ending the call. Back in the living room, Sarah rested on the couch, her breathing steady but fragile. Liam sat beside her, fingers entwined, while Ethan leaned against his mother's knees, his small face upturned with trust. Do you think we can ever go back?
Sarah whispered.
To what? Liam replied. To a life without all this pain. Liam paused, searching for the right words. Maybe not. But I think we can build something better.
A life where love is the foundation, not fear or regret.
Sarah closed her eyes and nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I want that too. In the weeks that followed, they began to rebuild not only their home but their dreams. Sarah reopened a small shop in town, selling fresh produce and homemade preserves, her hands busy but her spirit lightened by the customers who welcomed her warmly. Liam took a part-time position at the local community center, mentoring young people who reminded him of Ethan, full of hope but in need of guidance. Ethan blossomed, his laughter ringing through the fields and schoolyards alike. No longer burdened by a lonely childhood, he ran freely, the weight of the world lifted from his small shoulders. One evening, as the family gathered around a simple dinner, Sarah raised her glass of water. To us.
Tout second chance.
Liam and Ethan echoed her, their voices blending into a chorus of new beginnings. Outside, the stars twinkled with quiet approval, as if the universe itself had been waiting for this moment, the moment when broken pieces come together, not perfectly, but beautifully. The road ahead was still long, and the scars would remain. But they had found strength in each other.
In forgiveness. In love.
And that was enough.